Hey, those are cool tats, man.
Oh, for real. Thank you, bro. You
Yeah.
see the Cobra?
Hey, what is this one?
Oh, this? That's my credo. No regrets.
You have no regrets?
Dad?
Nope.
Like not even a single letter?
No way. Not me.
That's one of my favorite movie clips of all time. No regrets and not even a single letter? That's easy for you to say until you move to Phoenix, Arizona and aren't quite sure what you just signed up for. Now look, Phoenix is an amazing place. Gorgeous sunsets, epic hiking, amazing sunshine all year long. But trust me, it's not all pool parties and palm trees. I've talked to dozens of people that have moved here in just the last several months alone, and they each had at least one thing they wish they would have known before they moved to Phoenix. So in this video, we're gonna break down all the biggest regrets with an E
That's my credo. No regrets.
that people have when making the move to Phoenix, Arizona. Things like the hidden costs, the real story about the heat, and that some people come to Phoenix, Arizona and they feel a little disconnected after they get here. So stick around to the very end because I'm gonna share with you the key questions you need to ask yourself before making the move to Phoenix. So you can proudly say, no regrets, and actually mean it. Let's jump in.
That's my credo.
So myself and my team, well, we speak with buyers, people who just moved here all the time, every day, in fact, multiple times every day, and we've compiled a list of the top regrets they all say they have when moving here to Phoenix, Arizona. Now, most of these people will actually stay in Phoenix because the statistics will show you that most people will actually stay because the influx is greater than the outflux, even long term. And well, most people we talk to, the pros outweigh the cons when living in Phoenix, Arizona. But that doesn't mean there aren't regrets when someone makes the move, and we want you to skip all of that so that you're fully informed, so maybe you don't even come here to begin with. Because Phoenix, well, it's not for everyone. And if you think that's a bold statement, I'm gonna make one more right now. Call me, 480-660-5974, because I can give you the down, dirty, and the ugly and pretty of Phoenix, and you can ask as many questions as you want so we can have a two-way interaction as opposed to just this video. I look forward to speaking with you soon. And by the way, if you don't mind, hit that subscribe button and liking us. That way you never miss all these great videos we're putting out every single Saturday morning at 8 a.m. local time for your consistency and convenience. And let's jump into that list of the top regrets when people move to Phoenix, Arizona. And this list will not be your typical average ones that you're gonna hear on every other single YouTube video. These are gonna be specific down and dirty regrets that no one really talks about, but they wish they would have known. Number one, block walls. What? Yeah, that's right, block walls. When you are growing up in the Midwest or the East Coast, guys, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I remember going into a backyard of my friend's house or even one of my houses when I was fortunate enough as a kid to live in one, and you look down the rows of the backyards and you could see what Johnny, your little neighbor friend, was doing 7 houses down in his backyard. Why? Because of chain link fences. Now, the fancier houses would have wood fences in some cases, but you also had nice houses that had no fences for their backyards. Well, in Phoenix, Arizona, that is not the case. Phoenix and all the suburbs, for the most part, are going to have walls, and not just wood fence walls or chain link fences. We're talking block walls, concrete cement block walls. And so when I first came to Arizona in 2004, I thought that was really, really strange and weird, and I would never get used to this. Man, the neighborhoods, they look like a prison. Have you ever heard anyone talk about that in the forums, on Reddit, or anything of that nature, that the backyards look like a prison? Well, that's what a lot of people say when they first come to Arizona. But let me tell you, after living here for X amount of time, that will be different for everybody. You get used to it really quick, and you actually start to like it. I'm not kidding you guys, it's true. You will like having a block wall for your backyard separating you from your neighbors. Now, does that still inhibit a sense or lack thereof of community? Not really, because you will get what you put into it with your neighbors and your sense of community. But there's something to be said about when you go in your backyard and not having to worry about someone staring at you, looking at whatever it is you choose to do. And now what's weird is after living in Phoenix for 21 years, it's flipped for me, and I go back to the Midwest or East Coast and visit friends, and I get in the backyard and I think, oh, this is weird. Why is my neighbor looking at me while he's gardening? In fact, this just happened to me. My wife's from Columbus, Ohio. We went back there to visit some friends. We were staying at a house, and in the backyard, the neighbor was gardening, planting some plants, staring at me while he was doing it, while I was on the phone having a conversation in their backyard.
All the kids that wanna make the scene. That's my credo. No regrets.
I don't know. I just tend to like the block walls. But when you first come here, if you don't give enough time, you won't like it because you'll think it looks like a prison in all the neighborhoods. Speaking of block walls and prisons, well, the next regret is going to be that everyone says everything looks the same. And primarily we're talking about the houses. See guys, Phoenix had a construction boom and still has a construction boom. And believe it or not, Phoenix is actually still underserved in the amount of homes they have that they will need over the next 5 to 10 years. And trying to get caught up on that is going to be tough. And so what Phoenix is a sprawling community that's very spread out and large. And guess who the home builders primarily are? Well, they're not your mom and pop home building company that will build 5, 12, 20 homes at a time. These are the publicly traded large home builders like D.R. Horton, Pulte, Taylor Morrison, Lennar, and the list goes on, as there are quite a few here in the Phoenix area. And what they do is when they build homes, they buy big parcels of land. They buy the big parcels of land, they build huge communities in the hundreds of homes on up. And because they do that, they only offer typically several different floor plans in that community. And they'll have different elevations like an A, B, or C, where it's the same house, but it has maybe different elevation. Maybe one has more of a Spanish colonial territorial look. Maybe another one has some brick or block or stone on the front. And the other one is more just your basic ranch style look in the front. But it's the same floor plan. And they'll do that for maybe 3 to 4 floor plans, and typically that's where it starts. Now, if it's a really large community, they may offer 4, 5, or 6 potential floor plans, but they want to keep it somewhat simple. Why? Because that's, well, how they make their money. It's all economies of scale, and that's why some of these home builders get the name of production builders or tract home builders. Now, with that, they all have HOAs. So without going down a rabbit hole of HOAs, because I have a whole video on HOAs right here. But needless to say, these large home communities, well, they have HOAs governing the neighborhood. And part of the HOA rules will be the color scheme of the exterior of the home. So when you drive down a neighborhood that's a newer one, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, you're going to be governed by an HOA, and you're going to have color schemes that are earth tone colors for the most part. You're talking a variation of beige and brown primarily. Now you might have some light grays in there and some off-whites, but that's getting a little too risque, as most of them will be browns and beige and all the variations that go with that. So when people move here from the Midwest, the East Coast, or maybe the Pacific Northwest, one of the biggest complaints is everything looks the same. It looks brownish and desertish, and you would be right in saying that. But if you get past that, you will find that, yeah, although you may not have this array of different colors in a neighborhood, hopefully your neighborhood is actually cool because it has a lot of amenities in the neighborhood, from pocket parks to bike trails, walking paths, community centers, and depending on your neighborhood, it could have a lot more than just that. So hopefully that outweighs the fact that everything kind of looks bland and earth tone colors throughout most neighborhoods that are newer throughout the Phoenix area. And while I'm on that subject, I want to say one more thing about people saying everything looking the same in the desert, and that it's brown. Well, guys, it's all how you look at things. At the end of the day, brown is beautiful. Now, maybe houses all lined up in a row being brown is not so beautiful, and I would agree with you when it comes to that. But when it comes to natural landscape, a lot of people say everything's brown and it's not green and luscious. And you'd be right in saying that as well. There's been several published articles about brown being the new green. And even though it's not green, the desert natural landscape that is primarily brown is beautiful in its own right. Now, if you prefer to have green, there are plenty of places in America you can go for that. And frankly, I love green too. I grew up in Nebraska, in the heartland of America, and there's grass growing wild everywhere because, of course, you get good soil and a lot of rain. And when I first came to Arizona, I felt the same way. Well, it's kind of because it's just brown and desert everywhere. But now living here for a while, I've come to appreciate the desert beauty, and most of it being brown. It's just a different way you look at things. And there's this famous quote that says, change the way you look at things, and the way you look at things will change. And when it comes to living in the desert, that's the perspective you'll need to have if you're going to stay here long term. By the way, fun fact, the Sonoran Desert, which is where Phoenix actually sits, is one of the most beautiful deserts for a desert in all of the world. It is the only place in the entire world you will find saguaro cactus. And they are green and beautiful in their own right. So there's a little green color for you within the brown desert. The next regret that we heard is going to be the lack of transportation. A lot of people will come here from larger cities that have public transportation figured out really well, from subways to L trains to light rails, and the list goes on. Phoenix, well, we do have a light rail system, but it's nowhere close to many of these public transportation systems that the larger cities across America actually have. It's very restricted in terms of where it goes. It goes up the Central Corridor in uptown Phoenix, down to downtown Phoenix, and then it goes over to Tempe and into Mesa where it stops there. But that's just a small part of the overall greater Phoenix area. And so when it comes to living in Phoenix, you have to have a car. It is non-negotiable. If you don't like to drive, it's going to be a problem for you. If you don't like to take Ubers or Lyfts, it's going to be a problem for you. Now, if you really don't like people that much, you can take a Waymo, which is the driverless car, but that brings up its own other set of issues that you may not be comfortable with. But you're going to have to get in a car and drive to most places. Now, the good news about Phoenix is, even though it's spread out, it feels like you're in different little cities within cities sometimes, because take, for example, a big box store like a Home Depot is everywhere, multiple, many locations throughout Phoenix. So it's still convenient to get to the large scale amenities that any city would have, but you're gonna have to get in a car and drive. That's, again, non-negotiable. Did I mention that? So what does it cost to maintain a car in Phoenix? Well, it depends on what kind of car, of course, you have, but tires will probably be replaced a little more than usual. But because of the heat surface, they'll get worn out a little faster than, say, the average car that is driving around in Fargo, North Dakota. And fun fact, batteries. Car batteries will last a year to 2 years, typically max, in Arizona. That's right, you're gonna have to replace your car battery a lot more than you would living elsewhere in the country. Sometimes it can go 3 or 4 years. That is not totally out of the question, but don't be surprised if you're pushing it in your 3 or 4 and one day you go out to start your car and, well, it doesn't start. That's because the batteries need to be replaced more often. So it's a good idea potentially to invest in a AAA account when living in Phoenix, Arizona. Pro tip for you right there. Oh, and what's the cost when it comes to car registration? Well, the vehicle license tax in Arizona is a little more expensive than most states across the country. You're looking at $280 for every $100 of excess value the car currently has. So that can add up and be fairly pricey. But the good news is that it's based off the assessed value, which is always going to be a little bit lower than the retail or paid value of the car. And it does decrease every single year because it's a depreciating asset. So as long as you keep the car, the value of your car registration will go down every year as well. Oh, and you do have the ability to buy 2 years or up to 5 years for car registration for your tags of your license plate. And if you do that, you get discounts for multiple years buying up front. The next regret is going to be air quality. I didn't know air quality in Phoenix was this poor. Guys, air quality in Phoenix, it is poor. And I have to be honest with you, like I will with everything else on this channel. You know you can trust who you're getting advice from when it comes to this YouTube channel. Air quality is not good in Phoenix. So if you have asthma or more complicated breathing issues, Phoenix may not be the best place for you to live, at least full time. And why is that? Well, there are several reasons. Number one, because of the hot, dry climate. Number two, vehicle emissions, because there are so many cars, because we just covered that Phoenix is so spread out, you have to have a car. There are a lot of cars on the road, and therefore you have more emissions being put into the air. Number three are going to be dust storms. Even when there's not an official storm, it may get windy, and when it gets windy, because there's a lot of dust, because you're in the desert, sitting around the whole city in the area, it gets it stirred up a little bit, and it can cause pollutants in the air. All of this creates higher levels of ozone, and that's the issue that causes the breathing problems. But wait, there are a couple more reasons as well. The valley effect is another issue. What does that mean? Well, Phoenix sits in the valley. It's called the Valley of the Sun. You have mountains surrounding the entire Phoenix area for the most part, and therefore that ozone layer comes in thick. Your air doesn't really get out with the wind above the mountains, and it causes the air to sit right here, creating a little more pollution in the Phoenix area. So there are high pollution or air pollution advisory days where if you have breathing issues, it's best for you to stay inside most of the day. Because did you know that humidity actually helps the pollutants in the air dissipate at a higher rate? And so when you don't have that humidity, which is great for the fact that you're a little more comfortable outside, it's not great for people who have breathing problems. So pro tip to be aware of breathing issues. Phoenix, gonna be the best place for you to live full time. And speaking of being outdoors, the next regret is gonna be that Phoenix is just not a walkable city. Some people love being in a city that is walkable. Think of the larger cities. You're gonna have more of that vertical living where everything's kind of right within a block or two. Phoenix just doesn't really have that outside of a few places throughout the entire area. And so generally speaking, it's not a walkable city. That car thing I mentioned, yeah, you need to have one. Bicycles can work, but where you live matters as well. If you're in downtown Phoenix, you can probably get around without maybe having a car, But there's not a ton going on in downtown Phoenix, and some of the entertainment and some of the things to do are spread out in other entertainment nucleuses across the Phoenix Valley, like the Westgate area in Glendale, Old Town or downtown Scottsdale, the Scottsdale Quarter and Carolyn Commons area, and other places like that. And so unless you're living in one of these areas in a vertical condo living type situation, you're gonna have to walk in most places you go, because again, things are just kind of spread out. But I will give you a quick tip. If you want to be in one of those walkable areas, Phoenix does have some of those areas, and a few off the top of my head are going to be the Arcadia area, downtown Phoenix, Old Town Scottsdale, the Carolyn Commons Scottsdale Quarter area, and the historic districts in Uptown Phoenix, just to name a few. But outside of those, it's not the best walkable city in America. That is for certain. The next regret is going to be seasonal allergies. Now, this is coming from a guy who has no allergies. Thank you, Lord. I really am thankful and grateful for that. But my wife, on the other hand, she has a lot of allergies. They always seem to hit February to May. That is a great time of year typically for weather, but it also is the time where a lot of these desert plant life and trees bloom. And with those blooms, well, it causes allergies. So it actually is a place where you're gonna have a lot of allergy issues if that's something you're susceptible to. So for example, my wife and my oldest son, they have the allergies and they do have to take medicine from time to time for those allergies. And one thing we typically do, at least in our primary bedroom, is we will sleep with the windows closed, even though it might be gorgeous outside at nighttime, just because at certain points of the year, it's very difficult because of the allergies with the air coming in from outside and her breathing it in while she's trying to sleep. So that's something to just be aware of, and don't think just for a second because it's dry in Phoenix that allergies will not be an issue, because they very well may be. And speaking of seasons, let's go to the next regret, which are the summers are hot. This is the season in Arizona that you know I talk about, the season of hot. We have two seasons in Phoenix, Arizona. We have hot and we have pure awesomeness. That's it. There is no fall or spring. Those are the two that we have. And when you're not in pure awesome season, you have 4 months of it being hot. And just a little sidebar, the worst month of the year, in my opinion, is not, in terms of the heat, is not July. It's typically September. Now, September is not as hot as July, but June comes around, July comes around, even August, you're like, yeah, it's hot, but we expect it, we're prepared and ready for it. But then you're in school, you're not vacationing, you're not getting out of the heat, and September rolls around, you're like, okay, I'm ready. I look on social media or the news, I see people in other states having the leaves changing colors and falling down, and it's still pretty hot in Phoenix. So September can be a tough month, but then when October comes around and you do the same thing on social media, and in some parts of America, it's starting to snow already, and you look outside and it's 75 degrees, it's a beautiful thing, and then it just gets into pure awesomeness from there. But those 4 months are hot, and so you do have to deal with it. Now, one way of dealing with it, a lot of people, they'll go up to Flagstaff for the weekend, because Flagstaff, when it's 110 in Phoenix, can be literally 80 degrees. It can be beautiful. It's an entirely different climate with elevation at 7,000 feet and above. So if you have any questions about Flagstaff and Flagstaff real estate, I have a great connection up there. We'd be happy to hook you up and service you as best as we can with Flagstaff questions about real estate and life up there as well, because it's a gorgeous mountain town. But enough about Flagstaff, back to the heat. It's hot in the summer, and that's kind of like the winter for most people who live in the Northeast or Midwest. So my question to anyone who says, well, it's too hot in Phoenix would be, well, would you rather endure the heat in Phoenix and still be able to do all your outdoor activities in the morning time, even though it's a little bit hot, or live in another city or state somewhere where it snows for 3, 4, 5, 6 months out of the year, and you have to shovel snow, and you have to deal with the salt on the roads and your car being dirty and the car paint getting eaten up by the salt. You know what I'm talking about, come on. And so which one would you rather have, the least of two evils? The sunshine and the heat in the summertime, or that pesky snow and the gray skies? Well, most people, they would choose the summer in Phoenix, like we have in my family for the last 27 years. And even though it's hot, we can work around it and we can do our best to just kind of get used to it. And believe me, your blood does adapt. It does get thinner. Now when I go back to the Midwest and say it's November and it's only like 50 degrees, it may as well be 20, and I'm wearing that big coat because it just isn't the same after living in the desert, and you adapt over many, many years. Now, last but not least, one of the main regrets is that Phoenix is, well, transient. And so transient cannot be good from the standpoint of you don't have deep-rooted culture. You don't have 5th and 6th generation families living in the Phoenix area today. Now, you have some exceptions. There are some 3rd, 4th, 5th generation families out there, don't get me wrong. But you don't have a lot of that, where if you say you go to Chicago and you have the certain, Italian district and the Irish district in this particular city in Philadelphia, Philadelphia or New York City or these cities with a lot of rich history and time on their side. Phoenix doesn't have that. And so if you're looking for that area where Chinatown or these authentic areas of these certain ethnicities and cultures, you're just not going to find a lot of that in Phoenix because it's relatively a newer city. Now you do have that from a lot of Native Americans. There are many tribes throughout the state of Arizona that have been here for centuries and so much longer than most of the settlers in the Phoenix area. And so there's a lot of tradition when it comes to Native American culture. That is true. But when it comes to your typical culture, American culture of people who settled a city, it just doesn't have the history like many East Coast and Midwest cities have. But the flip side of that could actually be a good thing. Why? Because what this does is allow you to reinvent yourself easier than if you went somewhere else. See, Phoenix is somewhat of a melting pot, and every year that goes by, that's becoming less and less true because you have many people who are now choosing to stay in Phoenix, and their kids are staying in Phoenix, and grandkids, and so on and so forth. And so that deep-rooted culture will be a thing eventually, maybe in the next several decades, but it's just not here yet. But it does allow you the ability to reinvent yourself. And so a lot of people come to Phoenix for a fresh new start, maybe to get outside of a certain friend group or away from a certain family environment, or maybe they're reinventing themselves from a job perspective or career perspective. They want to start their own business. These are all things that Phoenix allows you to do because, again, it provides that aspect and that fabric for you to do so. So if that's something you're looking to do, then Phoenix would be a great place for you to come to. But for some people, being transient, and the fact that some people may come here for a few years and then leave and not settle down and create roots for tens to hundreds of years is a negative to some people, and they regret they didn't really understand that when they first moved here. So these are all things that you need to ask yourself before you make a move to any city in America, let alone Phoenix, Arizona. And if you're considering Phoenix, Arizona, I would love to chat with you further at your convenience. And I can give you a whole list of other things to also pay attention to that may not have hit the subjects for the top regrets that we've polled people most recently when moving to Arizona. Things like local economy, school districts, traffic flow, and it goes on and on from there. So give us a call, 480-660-5974, or book a time on our calendar link below, and we will hop on a Zoom call with you and speak with you as long as you would like to make sure all your questions are answered about everything Phoenix, because after all, that's the name of this YouTube channel. Go to subscribe and like us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to know if it's better to buy or rent currently in the Phoenix, Arizona area, then watch the video on the screen right after this.